we have somebody who runs one of the biggest presentation agencies in the world. Scott, welcome to the conference. Welcome to Present to Succeed 2021. It's a huge pleasure for us to welcome you and also just to give a short introduction, Scott is actually the CEO of Silver Fox Productions, which is again one of the biggest presentation agencies in the world. And he and his team are dealing with, we're not allowed to say the names, but let's just say with those very, very big tech keynotes. Scott, welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Boris. I'm glad to be here.
So I don't think that I have to say anything else because I'm so curious to hear your presentation. I know more or less what you're going to cover, but I don't know all the details, and I'm really curious. So please take it away from here.
All right, great. Thank you, Boris. It's a pleasure being with you all today. I hope you're having a great show. Today, I want to talk about some of the lessons that can be learned from executive keynotes, obviously, as Boris mentioned. And I want to walk you through some real scenarios that happened. But first, I want to start off with a story that came from working with a speaker early on in my career. It's one of my first speakers, actually. And it really informed me on, it's kind of an epiphany where I realized that what the audience sees isn't necessarily the whole story of what goes on to get to great performance. And this speaker is well known, and their personal brand really was built on public speaking. And during the rehearsal, it wasn't going so well. The speaker seemed a little nervous, and he turned to me and said, Scott, this is a different talk than my audience typically expects from me. The content is completely different. I'm really nervous. I don't think they're going to like it. And I assured him that, hey, this audience that we have here today is different from your normal audience, and they're going to absolutely love this talk. I've actually seen your talk before, and I love it. So boosted his confidence. He ended up delivering a great presentation and got a standing ovation. So again, really what the audience sees is not actually what happened. It's not the whole story. You see a confident speaker, yet backstage they're quite nervous. And I'm sure you all know how you feel backstage before you speak and how you feel while you're on stage and definitely how you feel afterwards. So I want to share some stories that hopefully you're going to relate to and see what we can learn from them and get some best practices. I'd like to add some structure to what we're going to learn, and by introducing 4 areas of focus that can help you grow as a speaker, and we're going to call those the 4 Ps. And you can apply these to every time you speak, whether it's at a live event or it's a small meeting or even one-on-one conversations. First up, planning. What are the goals for the talk or event? Is there clear communication on the event narrative? And do you understand what your role is and what it isn't? Second, presentation. Do you know what content you're to deliver? Are you developing your narrative along with your visuals? Because visuals serve to reinforce spoken content. And then we've got practice. You can't practice enough. It's all about rehearsing and then adjusting based on how your rehearsal went, and then you repeat the process, and you can't repeat it enough. Then we have performance. A key to great performance is having a strong, trustworthy support team. And you need to have the ability to be able to focus, let go of any doubt, and just do your best. And afterwards, you're going to want to critique and receive the critique of others, of that support team that you trust, so that you can learn and improve and take all those lessons into the next time you speak. So let's do a quick self-assessment. So if you have it available, grab a pencil and paper and do this exercise along with me. As we go along go through these 4 areas of focus again, rate yourself by placing a dot on each axis, working from the middle, which is not so good at the center, and expanding out to really good. So you want to rate how you would critique yourself right now. And be sure to be honest. This only works if you're truly honest. First up, planning. When you last presented, or if you haven't yet and you're thinking about your upcoming talk, were you clear on the goals of the event or the talk? Did you understand why you were there to speak? Do you know where your talk fit into the narrative of the event? Did you know which content you were supposed to deliver? So go ahead and rate yourself on that axis, and you can see the dot there as a sample, and it's kind of right in the middle of the road. And when it came to your presentation, how much effort and attention did you put into your presentation? Did you get professional presentation design help, or did you cobble it together? Because often these things happen the last minute, whether it's on the airplane or in your hotel room getting ready. And then in practice, did you actually rehearse your talk? Did you do it on your own? Did you have a coach to help you out? Were there rehearsals scheduled, and did you attend them? Were you provided with support? And if you weren't, did you actively seek it out? And then when it came to your performance, how would you rate your delivery? How do you feel you do as a speaker? Do you feel great? Or do you often find yourself just feeling glad that it's over? And then afterwards, did you gather feedback and take notes on how you're going to improve next time? And then did you actually take that feedback and that information into the planning for your next talk? So then if we connect these dots, we're going to get a wheel. And this is more of a rhombus right now, but let's just pretend it's a wheel. Is it lopsided? And if it is, you're not alone. If it's nice and even, just stick with me as we go through some stories that you might find yourself adjusting your assessment a little bit. Now, here's mine. And this is basically how I feel about myself as a speaker, and it is lopsided. And if I use this presentation that you're watching right now as an example, I think about planning. How did I do? I did okay. I spoke with Boris quite a few times, and he helped me understand the specific topic he wanted me to speak on. He helped me understand who's attending and why they're going to be there, which is all of you. As far as the presentation goes, I'm really lucky that I'm surrounded by great presentation designers every day to help me out. And when it comes to practice, I feel a little weaker here. I like to practice in isolation. I probably shouldn't like to just practice in isolation. I do this, honestly. I do fear critique. I feel like it'll hack my confidence, or it might just reveal something that requires me to completely start over. And then when it comes to performance, I typically feel good, but I'd say I often feel pretty relieved that it's over. And then I always watch the video recording of myself to critique myself. And often I see that there are many areas where I'm rolling my eyeballs at myself. That really comes from, my performance suffers probably from practicing in isolation too much, not getting enough help with that. So our goal here is to even out our wheels and then grow it outwards. So let's set that assessment aside, and I'm going to share some real life backstage experiences and see what their wheels look like. First up, we've got the boss, and a typical boss wheel looks like this. So they're busy people, and they're often too busy to really participate in the planning. And so the strategic vision and the tactics that go along for the execution of that vision, that information doesn't necessarily always trickle down to all the people who need it, and it makes it difficult to plan an overarching narrative. The boss typically has access to resources to develop a great presentation, although their feedback sometimes only comes right before they go on stage. And then practice. Before and during an event, the boss is typically very busy doing a number of other things. There's a lot of strain on their time, so it's quite often that the boss misses practice. But the boss is a natural performer. I like to call them the natural. And, in fact, this is one of the reasons why they are the boss. However, here's a story where it didn't go so well for a boss. Now, there was a company who was a startup and was wildly successful, grew into over 1,000 employees. And right before this event, the company was purchased for an ungodly sum of money, which led to a shakeup in the leadership team, which previously had been really strong and communicative. And our speaker was a founding partner, ended up in a position where a new CEO was appointed that used to be one of their reports. So the morning of the keynote, I decided to attend that keynote of the CEO just to see what was going to be said and make sure that everything was good with our talk as well, and everything was going to flow together. And to our dismay, basically everything that was said during that keynote was a duplicate of what we had worked on with our speaker. So it basically neutralized all of the content that we had worked with the speaker on. So everybody felt a little bit sabotaged because the content was not only developed in a bubble, but it seemed like it was kept private. And so people really didn't understand the new roles, and we didn't really understand the audience wanted to hear. And in this planning phase where everybody could work together, it really, not just our speaker, most of the speakers following this keynote were kind of left at a loss of what they were, why they were there, what they were supposed to say, what the vision was, all of those things. And to be fair, this was pretty rough on the speaker. It felt a little bit like sabotage. As far as the presentation went, as a result of the planning, the poor planning, it obviously neutralized our speaker's content. And then all of a sudden there became as we huddled together, and we had about 30 minutes to redo everything. The visuals became disconnected with the spoken content, which we were trying to cobble together. Unfortunately, our speaker had decided to skip the scheduled rehearsals. So when we had to bring in emergency rehearsals in that 30 minutes, we were already well behind. So everybody was struggling. The speaker was definitely quite frustrated, and there's a lot of anxiety backstage. So then when it came to the performance, all of these events had the speaker visually rattled when they went out on stage, really came off frustrated. The content was in disarray, so that was confusing for the audience, and they were visibly angry, and it seemed like at everyone, and it seemed almost like they were angry at the audience. So not a really good situation. That leads me to another speaker that we'll call the Sophomore. This was a great company, really tight leadership team with awesome communication. They all collaborated well, and they understood their roles and their content and how it fit into the larger narrative. Presentation, they utilized resources. They not only had them, but they used them, so everything looked great as well. Our Sophomore, our speaker, definitely attended rehearsals, but something changed in between the event planning and the presentation development. The speaker in rehearsals seemed to actively resist the feedback from the expertise that was there to help them. And instead, it seemed like they were nervous but trying to hide it, and they were drawn to getting feedback and support from only their peers, which helped boost their ego. And then when it came to the performance, they weren't necessarily prepared, and they were coming from the wrong place. So they were out of sync with their presentation. The tone was pretty arrogant, which gave off an air of being insecure, and therefore it really fell out of the narrative of the larger event as a whole. And when they came back off stage, they felt great, and they got high fives from all their peers. And when in fact, if you looked out at the audience, they seemed very confused. It was a pretty poor performance with some courtesy claps, and that was about it. The speaker also didn't want to really hear any critique Afterwards, they pretty much disappeared, obviously glad it was over, and moved on really quickly. Then there's the rookie. So this person was recently promoted into a leadership position, and with that position came the responsibility of starting to speak on stage to the audience, whereas before they were in the audience listening to the leader. Now they're the leader on stage. So quite frightening. But luckily, this speaker was driven to do really great. So in the planning process, they really wanted to understand the role in the narrative and what that narrative is or was. So they sought out the content that they needed to deliver, and really encouraged great communication throughout the team. If it wasn't there and they weren't getting information, they went after it, and that actually was infectious to the rest of the team, which helped the overarching communication between everybody. And when it came to developing the presentation, the speaker utilized every resource available. However, we had to dial back some of the interaction that could have been done with the visuals to adjust to their comfort level. So that meant using more bulleted lists that provided a feeling of safety and guidance while they're on stage so they wouldn't get lost in their talk. And then practice. This person was amazing. They not only attended all of their scheduled rehearsals, but they asked for more. In fact, they probably did about 15 plus rehearsals. And they listened and practiced the advice that the coaches were giving and the expertise that was available to them, and they were putting it into practice. And you could tell and see their growth during all of these rehearsals, which led us up to the performance where everybody felt really good, including the speaker. However, when they stepped out on stage, you could kind of see a switch happen where the nerves came back, and that was pretty visible to the audience. However, that sense that the speaker had the courage to step up and was expressing that vulnerability, it really made the message more authentic. However, the one downside is that after 5 or 10 minutes, that the nervous energy became somewhat of a distraction due to their discomfort. So if we look back on these 3 stories, and then you look at the wheel that you drew for yourself, which one most closely resembles the wheel that you drew out? Do you have a different shape, completely different shape, but finding yourself relating to one of these stories? But most of us feel like the rookie. And in all honesty, more times often than not, we find ourselves having similar behaviors of the boss or the sophomore. But note that the rookie has the most even shape. So when we look at speakers, and the speakers I've worked with that I would consider naturals, and these are the ones that we all admire and we wish we could be on stage, the truth is that they would pretty much all assess themselves like the rookie, and the only difference is that they would give themselves lower marks. So our goal here is to becoming a better speaker is to really round this wheel out. And then we want to learn how to expand it evenly so we can improve. So when it comes to planning, the best results have structured and fluid communications. And if it's not there, you got to speak up and help it happen. Now, this isn't always in your control, but if you are the leader, make sure you're clearly sharing the narrative, the content, and everyone's roles. And then when it comes to developing your presentation, you want to develop a relationship with design talent you can depend on. This talent should be super easy to collaborate with. They need to be great listeners. They need to understand your goals and content, not just make your content look pretty. And you want to make sure you're working with a design talent that doesn't agree with you all the time. They're going to give their expert opinion, and they're going to go against perhaps what you believe, because you're not an expert graphic designer, nor should you be. That's not your job. And then when it comes to practice, you need to make sure you're showing up for your rehearsals. You ask for more rehearsals. Don't wait to rehearse until your rehearsals. And it's a really great practice to set aside, say, 15 to 30 minutes a day to run through your presentation on your own, well in advance of when you're going to give it. And that cadence helps you get really comfortable and iron things out. And then with your performance, this is where most of us struggle. And this is really due to two things. We have varying investments in planning, presentation, and practice. The fear of speaking can cause denial of the task at hand. We can overcompensate with our egos, and this often has us actively avoiding planning, presentation, and practice. So what we need to do here is seek out non-biased expertise that you can trust, and that expertise needs to get to know you and your voice. And remember, rounding out your wheel is a process of growth through focused and structured discipline. That discipline is so important. It helps us in the relentless pursuit of better, fully knowing that perfection is not attainable. The natural knows this. They always believe they can improve. Even though they can look perfect to us, they don't believe that. So to become a natural, as I mentioned, you really want to get that support. That means finding the non-biased expertise you can trust, and then importantly, you need to trust them. It's good to build a toolkit, which includes a writer, a coach, a presentation designer, a great production team with a stage manager. And a natural never forgets to recognize and celebrate their incremental growth. They know that they're going to have good days and they're going to have less than good days, but they always try their best. So if you feel yourself getting lost or anxious, always come back to the 4 Ps: plan, presentation, practice, and performance. Remember, luck doesn't play much role here, so don't depend on luck. Preparation does. Thank you, and if there are any questions, I'd enjoy answering the best I can.
All right, all right. That was I have never seen that categorization of the 4 Ps, even when we talked in the podcast. That's something new. Is that something new that you worked on?
It's interesting with every speaking engagement. I like to see it as an opportunity to be creative, and it's the 4 Ps is something that I've always focused on, but never really wrote down before. It's definitely a process I put myself through and put speakers through. And this was really a great opportunity to sit down and say, let's get really specific and write this down and see how we can share it. It's easy to share one-on-one when you're coaching, but in this format, when I can't see anybody in the audience, and you need to be more specific. So the 4 Ps really came about that way.
Interesting. Scott, when we were talking a few months ago, you mentioned that one of the biggest tech keynotes that you worked on was actually delivered at the end of the day by someone who was so busy. And I'm going to give that example, and I will be super happy if you can give us a little bit more details about that story without, of course, telling us company name, whoever the person was, etc. We don't care about that. But this person was, based on your words, that back then so busy, yet he was working for such a big company, and that keynote was so important, but he was so busy because of, again, you said it, his calendar is not full of meetings just for the sake of meetings. Each and every meeting that he had is a crucial meeting. Like, he cannot miss those meetings, right? It's just impossible. And this person actually went on stage and delivered a very big tech keynote without preparation. However, he did it he did tremendous work based on what I remember. Probably he is the boss, right? Obviously, he is the boss here. Tell us a little bit more about those people? Like, how are they, because you said natural performers, natural presenters, but are they really just natural presenters? Like, how is that, like, where are they getting all of that preparation that they have so that even though they are not ready to rehearse with you or with someone else, they just go on stage and deliver? Like, how are they doing this?
Well, some of us are blessed with the gift of gab, so words come very easily. But the speaker you're talking about, he was always, I think, in every aspect of his life, practicing and rehearsing. Because he's a leader, obviously knew the content quite well, but always driven to do better, and seemed to, in every conversation, was treating it as a live performance and trying to improve. And if he felt weak in one spot, even if he didn't feel weak, he would go seek out expert help, not waiting till it was needed, like right before speaking, but it was always a process. It's part of their daily routine to look at how they can improve and get the help to do that. And even if he couldn't see an area, commonly referred to as a blind spot, actively going after people to shed a light on those blind spots. So it really felt like this person was always prepared because they're always preparing.
They're always prepared. Because they're always preparing. That's a quote. All right. There is a question, by the way. I'm looking to our marketing person who is sitting right there. That is a quote that we need to probably share from the event. There is a question that's very much related to what I just asked you in regards to how do you help your clients and their organizations prioritize the prep and practice, especially when they are those top executives, like when they're so busy. Like, how do you do that?
Really, to help them out, it takes great organization and building out a schedule, and then making sure that there's an individual that is constantly on that person to help them stick to that schedule. They often get pulled in this direction and that, and even they get pulled away from their existing schedule. But they really need somebody to help grab them by the arm, and if there's a rehearsal, drag them to the rehearsal, because it's just so easy to get distracted on site. So again, that person is part of the support team, and typically this would be, say, it can be the speaker coach, or the stage manager, setting a schedule where these things are required. Honestly, some of the most recent practices that I'm hearing due to hybrid events or virtual events of that we're going through right now, I've actually seen where if you don't rehearse, you don't get to talk.
Wow.
You'll be replaced. And that has actually encouraged speakers to engage earlier, which leads to obviously better preparation, better presentations. So we're liking that practice. That helps add the structure, but you definitely have to have structure in place, either whether it's provided by a support person or just by how the event's going to be run.
Interesting. If you don't practice, you don't get to speak.
Yeah. It's kind of a wild card, because if you don't practice, nobody else knows necessarily what you're going to end up saying on the stage, so you can actually throw off the event narrative. So practice is really important,
especially when the stakes are high.
Yeah, the event needs to be a success, and the stakes are always high, and rehearsal is one way to make sure that the event is successful, and that the event is much more important than any individual speaker.
Okay, Scott, I will encourage people to ask and add questions to the Q&A section, because we have at least 10 more minutes together. And while we're waiting for questions, I want to ask you, how does it look behind the scenes, especially when we talk about the technical part? Like in the tech world, and not only the tech world. Nowadays, a lot of people are doing technical demos, right? They share something on
Yes.
stage, they bring their phones are being presented on the big screens. Back then when there were conferences live, but now virtually. How does it look? Because I can only imagine, and I have heard stories for some organizations that are triple backed, right? For example, here in our studio, we are triple backed on everything. But I can imagine that, like, if you are one of those top 5 or 10 brands in the world, everything is how many how many times do they back up the network, the demos, how does it look behind the scenes?
Well, best practices, it's really interesting because when you're in the audience, you see this nice clean screen and these curtains and stuff, but you never see all the miles, literally miles of cable that's backstage and the tons of equipment that's used. There's in the best scenarios, you at least have one backup. The greatest shows will have 3 backups, and there's also a disaster scenario in case something really goes wrong. For instance, one time there was a fire in the server room, so that caused all kinds of problems. And another time it rained so hard that the roof collapsed and it started raining backstage, which is really bad
Wow.
for electrical equipment. So you got to be ready to adjust for anything. And backstage, you definitely have each workstation, whether it's graphics or video, or if you're running the microphones or all the different things that go into it, you want to have a plan B and C and D. So not only is your technology backed up, but your process needs to be backed up in case you really need to ad lib. So you just need to be ready for anything.
Yeah. The what ifs, we like to say with our customers, what are the what ifs? What if this fails? What if that fails? How are you going to react?
Yes.
One of the other.
And I think you mentioned like demos. An important thing to remember is you need to be ready for that demo to fail. Because often in rehearsals, when companies want to give a real product demo of a real live product, because we're all really proud of those things, and that's understandable. However, when the audience comes in and say you have 5,000 attendees, you're adding sometimes 8,000 devices that are pulling internet bandwidth down. And if you're not prepared with, if you're not hardwired with internet access, which your device is not, if you're doing a mobile demo, it's not wired in, you're going to be struggling to get that bandwidth. And we've seen these demos just completely break down, and it's really an embarrassing situation. But it could be avoided by doing a demo that is pre-planned. It's a virtual demo. It's not a live demo. You're pretty much better off doing a virtual demo and encouraging people to go try it out for themselves and have a way for them to do that.
Yeah. Of course, there is one question, by the way, that I find very interesting. Just came in from David, who says, based on your experience with the organizations that you work with, and when we talk about the rehearsals, what are those rehearsals looking like? Are they full rehearsals? Are you just practicing some parts? What's happening?
A basic rehearsal should last 30 to 45 minutes if you can get that much time. The real goal is, I feel like the most uncomfortable thing for a speaker is the moment you walk out on stage. Because you can rehearse all you want in your room or in an empty room, but when you walk out and there's all these faces looking at you, it can become quite a shock. So in a rehearsal, what you want to do is take a speaker through that experience of getting on that stage, standing there, looking out over the room, getting comfortable with it. And that involves a lot of coaching techniques of how to stand, how to move, how to address, change your body positioning so you're addressing different parts of the audience and everybody in the audience. What do you do with your hands? One of the biggest hurdles is clicking through your slides, self-advancing your slides, and getting comfortable with the notes monitor that's downstage. The more you can get comfortable with, as far as being on that stage, how you move, how the technology is working, the more you can pretty much relax about that, so that when you do step out on stage, you have that extra bit of confidence so you can really just focus on your delivery.
And by the way, there is...
And
Yep.
to answer, you don't need to necessarily run through your whole talk. It depends whatever gets you to that level of comfort. Some presenters like to do word for word their entire talk, and some like to stand up there and click through their slides just so they get comfortable, and they just test their microphone by maybe talking for just a few minutes.
Yeah. By the way, there are two questions that are very, I think, I will categorize them as typical, but people are obviously curious, especially to hear the answers from you. The first one is the positive type of question, in meaning what is the presentation case that you and your company are most proud of? It's not an easy one.
That's a tough one. We've been in business for a long time, so I think for me personally, there's a handful that I just found super rewarding. One of them was working with a speaker that it was kind of interesting. In the first meeting, I overheard him expressing frustration with an individual on his team that he does not want his people to only say yes to him, because he's used to people saying, yes, you're the greatest. He did not want that. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go in there and really shake things up, which I'd like to do anyway. So in our storyboarding process, really flipped everything on the head, and it took a big risk, because I felt like if I blew it, I was going to get kicked out of the room. And he decided to take that risk. So this person had that gift of gab. I mean, just an awesome storyteller with a million stories to tell. It's a matter of how do we structure these stories. So he really went with me to devise this really creative storytelling strategy to get to the key point, and it was very creative, and he went with it. And luckily I had a great speaker to work with, because he was comfortable and could deal with this more unconventional, unexpected type of narrative that we were delivering. He really wanted his visuals to be spot on and perfect, and he rehearsed, just hours and hours on stage with us. And I felt like it was a pretty magical keynote that he gave, and he got a lot of feedback that was pretty unique. That it wasn't just typical, hey, good job, hey, learned a lot, stuff like that. They were like, wow, that was really, I've never seen anything like that before, kind of feedback. So I'm really proud of that one. That was a lot of fun, but I had a lot of really good raw material to work with in that speaker.
All right, so names should stay out of the conversation, obviously. By the way, the other question is the opposite one, more or less the opposite one. So what is the biggest failure that you have experienced with an executive? Like, let's go there. Again, no names, no companies, just what is the biggest thing that you experienced with somebody that's on an executive role, of course?
Yeah, I have to relate back to that story, the boss story. That one happens more often than I'd like to say, because I have a number of those stories, and they're all very similar. And it really is, I feel like they're not only being too busy, but there's almost a sort of avoidance of this big thing that needs to happen, because there's all these other big things happening. So everything gets deprioritized. And it can make for someone who doesn't want to collaborate. It seems like they're fighting everybody that's there to support them, and things go wrong, and then it quickly turns to blame to everybody around them, because things did go wrong, when in fact they didn't put much effort into it. They didn't listen to their sport teams. They didn't rehearse. They didn't do anything to set themselves up for success. And I feel often, because they're successful as a boss, they feel like that success is just going to translate automatically on stage, and everybody has to listen to them. So I think ego enters into there, and it's really a recipe for honestly, I feel like some of these things are disasters, and when they could have been so great. I take it to heart. I'm fairly critical because I really like to see speakers succeed, and um, I really don't like it when there's something that could have been done to make something much better.
Yeah. Technical one, and let's go here. Technical one, because people are asking about, hey, what about when we talk about the preparation, when we talk about the practice, when they're not able to get a commercial service or somebody from outside to help them with that stuff? What are your ideas? How can people, like, what can people do by themselves maybe to help themselves in regards to the preparation and the practice and the rehearsals?
Yeah, I thought this question would come up, and that's a tough one because if the company you're with, or say you have your own company, and you don't have the contacts or the budget to hire the expertise, and you're not supplied with it, um, you kind of have to do the best you can. And for myself, I really didn't have that, but luckily I'm in the industry, so being surrounded by people with this expertise, I learned everything I know on the fly. So working side by side with the coach, I learned all about coaching. Side by side with writers, I learned all about writing. And obviously, presentation design is what we do. So, but if you don't have access, I don't think you're limited as much as you think. I would definitely reach out to speaker coaches. You just Google them and you can find them, and just talk to them. They're willing to work with you. A lot of them have workshops that can help you as a group, which helps with the cost. And they're going to help move you forward. And you might end up clicking and finding some way to work with them. If budget is an issue, there's ways to work in kind with each other, and share services. Presentation design. There's a lot of books, and actually there's a lot of YouTube videos now that can help you do the basics. And if you find yourself at a loss because you're not a designer, just keep it really simple. Even so much so that you focus more on your talk and your narrative, and go with, say, like a slide I have up now is just our logo. So if I'm talking about my company, I don't need much more than my logo up there as long as I'm giving a good talk. So, find what you can. It's out there. Start small, try to build your support team, and focus on the strengths that are available to you and what you can work on.
Perfect. And probably this is the perfect moment for me to say that tomorrow we have a full-blown session on what are the resources that are available for everyone that are completely free and are on the web. As you said, just Google it, and many of them you will find yourself. Tomorrow there is going to be, in the tools, the so-called tools track, there will be a 45-minute discussion between me and two incredible and great people from the presentation industry who are going to share all of the resources more or less that they know. I doubt that they're going to be able to share all of the resources they know because they know a lot, but they'll share the top resources where you can find incredible presentation information, advices, you can ask questions, you can listen to audio podcasts, etc. on the topic. Scott, thank you so much for joining. I think that this was...
Thank you, Boris.
An incredible insight into how do you see things from your end, which is that place where a lot of people see only the end result. But what it takes behind the scenes is always interesting to see, always interesting to learn. So thank you for sharing so much with us in this last session from the first day of our conference.
Great. Thank you, Boris, and thank you for inviting me to speak.